You open your eyes in a mud-filled trench before Sevastopol as the earth shakes violently. Cannon smoke covers the sky, leaving the Crimean sun as only a dim blur. Your hands cling to the cold earth as shells tear through the air above you. Around you, exhausted soldiers whisper prayers while gunfire never stops outside the trench. Far ahead, Malakoff sinks into smoke like the final heart of the Russian defense. Every explosion shakes the ground as if the whole Crimean peninsula is about to split apart.
An officer screams an order, but wind and distant thunder swallow every word.
A torn flag snaps through the smoke, warning that the decisive moment has arrived. If Sevastopol falls, Russian power across the Black Sea may be crushed.
But before this moment, hundreds of thousands of people were pulled toward this hell. This was not only a war over holy places inside the Ottoman Empire.
It was a collision between Russian ambition and the fear spreading across Europe. Britain, France, the Ottoman Empire, and Sardinia came to Crimea to stop one empire. In mud, disease, and winter cold, courage alone could not save everyone. A wrong order turned cavalrymen into shadows, charging straight into cannon fire. Some trenches were so cold that death seemed to arrive before the first bullet. You stand at the moment a city collapses and a new order begins to form. Why did this war begin, and who truly paid the heaviest price?
Scribe, then step into the Crimean battlefield through your own eyes.
The story begins before the cannons, inside rooms where diplomacy turns into disaster. Travel back to Constantinople, where church bells echo across the Bosporus. Before your eyes, Ottoman boats drift beneath palaces and mosques along the strait. The city still shines, but the air already carries a fear no one can hide. Ottoman officials move quickly through stone corridors, whispering about pressure from the north. On the diplomatic table, maps of the Balkans, the Black Sea, and Palestine lie open. You see fingers point toward Jerusalem, where holy places become the first spark. France wants to protect Catholic influence in the holy places under Ottoman rule. Russia declares that it must protect Orthodox believers living under the Sultan. The words sound religious, but behind them stands the cold ambition of empires. Every sacred privilege becomes another piece on the chessboard of Europe. You cross a courtyard where Ottoman soldiers clean their rifles with anxious faces. They know their era is transitioning, even while the flag still flies. Far to the north, the Russian ruler sees the Ottoman Empire as a sick body.
В понимании России настал момент продвинуть влияние на юг, на Балканы.
If Russia controls the Black Sea exit, it moves closer to the Mediterranean. That possibility frightens Britain, because sea routes and power could be overturned. France also refuses to stand aside when honor and influence are being tested. You hear the names of empires spoken in the room, heavy as cannon fire. Russia, the Ottoman Empire, Britain and France have not fired yet, but war already has a shape.
On the streets of Constantinople, people hear rumors and exchange frightened looks.
A vendor lowers his voice and says Russian troops could cross the river at any time. An Ottoman sailor tightens a mooring rope, his eyes fixed on the dark sea.
You feel the city standing like a thin door between peace and disaster.
Inside the palace, the Russian envoy enters with a heavy coat and a hard stare. He carries demands that make the Ottoman court feel its sovereignty is under threat. If the Sultan accepts, it will feel like giving part of the empire's soul to Russia. If he refuses, northern armies may pour across the frontier. Standing beside the great door, you hear arguments strike like knives against stone. No one in that room wants to admit he is opening the door to war. Yet every hesitant answer pushes Europe another step closer to flames. Then grim news arrives. Russian troops have entered Moldavia and Wallachia near the Danube.
Inside a harbor tavern, sailors fall silent when those provinces are named.
For the Ottomans, this is no longer diplomacy. It is a direct violation.
You see young soldiers receive uniforms, their hands clumsy on the straps.
They do not know whether they fight for the Sultan, the holy places, or honor.
On the harbor stones, cannons are dragged forward, their wooden wheels grinding loudly. Gun oil, horse sweat, and seawater mix together in the heavy evening air. Clerics pray, while commanders stare at maps with tired eyes. Across the continent, the administration monitors every move with deep focus.
The British fear that a powerful Russia could threaten the road to India.
In Paris, the French ruler wants to prove France is still a decisive power. Honor, religion, trade, and strategy twist together into a deadly knot. You step outside and see red sunset falling over the domes of Constantinople. That red color feels like a warning for fields that will soon fill with smoke.
When the Ottomans declare war on Russia, drums echo through the coastal barracks.
Civilians crowd the gate, trying to see their loved ones before they leave.
A mother holds her son's hand, but the young soldier must still step into line. You hear swallowed tears mixing with iron-shod boots striking the stone road. At first, the battlefield is not Crimea, but the Danube and the Black Sea. Fortresses along the river become hot points where the Ottomans try to stop Russia. On the sea, historic warships monitor each other beneath heavy clouds. Then disaster at Sinop shocks Europe, and public anger begins to burn. Ottoman ships lie destroyed, and black smoke rises like a desperate call for help.
You can almost hear newspapers in London and Paris turning battle news into outrage. The public demands action, and Britain and France can no longer stand aside. An alliance begins to form, not from trust, but from a shared fear of Russia. Crimea slowly appears on the map as the target needed to break Sevastopol. That naval base is the key to Russian strength across the Black Sea. You watch Allied ships prepare to sail, knowing the real storm is coming. From palace demands, the war becomes a journey toward a Crimean hell. You stand on the Black Sea coast, where cold wind pushes against heavy sails. News of war spreads from Ottoman camps into taverns crowded with sailors. The soldiers look north, where Russian forces hold the Danubian lands. Before your eyes, Ottoman artillery is dragged through mud toward the river fortresses. The wooden wheels grind through wet earth, like a warning of a season of death. They have not seen Crimea, but already feel the shadow of a greater war. Along the Danube, gun smoke begins to cover villages and low fields. The Ottoman defense is fierce, and the Russians learn this campaign will not be easy. In the firelight, you hear stories of Silistra and besieged frontier forts.
A young soldier asks whether Britain and France will truly come.
The answer appears from the sea, in great fleets carrying foreign flags.
British and French warships enter Ottoman waters like floating cities of iron.
On deck, sailors polish cannon while officers study the maps through telescopes.
They have not come only to aid the Ottomans, but to block Russia's road. After Sinop, the Western public sees the Russian Navy as a dangerous threat. London and Paris decide the Black Sea cannot remain under the Tsar's shadow.
You follow the Allied army to Varna, where camps rise beside the sea.
Tents stretch under the heat among ammunition, wagons, horses, and field hospitals.
Before the great guns open fire, an invisible enemy enters the camp.
Disease, dirty water, and broken logistics begin killing men silently day by day. You pass rows of stretchers and hear weak coughing beneath hot canvas.
Modern war exposes imperial clumsiness before the battlefield has even erupted.
Then surprising news comes. Russia has withdrawn from Moldavia and Wallachia.
Many think the war could end, but commanders refuse to go home empty-handed. If Sevastopol remains, the Black Sea Fleet still has a heart to beat.
You look down at the map of Crimea and see Sevastopol circled in red.
The new target is clear. The Allies must strike Russia's main naval base.
Transport ships are loaded with ammunition, hard rations, horses, and anxious faces. As the fleet leaves Varna, the Black Sea looks like a gate into hell. British, French, and Ottoman soldiers crowd the deck, seasick and clutching their rifles. No one knows whether the landing beach will be quiet or under a rain of cannon fire. On September 14th, 1854, Crimea appears through the mist.
You stand in a landing boat at Calamita Bay, hearing waves slap the wooden side.
The beach ahead is so empty it feels as if Crimea is holding its breath.
Then rows of soldiers step into cold water, hauling guns and ammunition ashore.
Heavy boots sink into wet sand, and the pack on your shoulders feels like stone. The Russians do not strike hard on the beach, and the Allies breathe for a moment. But the relief is brief, because a stronger Russian defense waits to the south. You march across the Crimean grassland, where dust fills your throat and eyes.
Men fall from heat, thirst, and exhaustion before they even see the Russian line.
On September 20th, the Alma River appears beneath heights held by Russia.
On the slope, Russian cannon wait with their mouths aimed down at the advancing lines.
You hear the first shot scream past, then the ground ahead erupts into dust. French troops climb near the sea, while British troops cross the river under fire. Old river water wraps around your legs as drums beat through the white smoke. Russian soldiers fire from the heights, believing the ground will break every attack. The Allied lines still move, slow and confused, then suddenly push ahead. You see a French flag rise on the high slope, and the Russian line begins to shake.
British infantry suffer badly, but still push toward the Russian guns on the hill.
When the Russians withdraw from Alma, exhausted Allied soldiers cheer through the smoke. The first Allied victory in Crimea is won, but a great chance is missed. Sevastopol is not fully defended, yet the Allies do not strike it at once.
You watch the generals argue while battlefield dust still clings to their coats.
Instead of rushing the city, the army turns south to find a supply port. That decision gives Russia precious time to turn Sevastopol into a giant fortress. Inside the city, Russian sailors strip guns from ships and drag them onto the earthworks. Warships are sunk to block the harbor, sacrificing the sea for the land. By the time you reach the southern heights, Sevastopol is no longer a weak target.
Before you stand trenches, forts, mud, and the beginning of a long siege.
The landing that seemed quick has become a doorway into the Crimean winter. You enter Balaclava, where a small harbor becomes the lifeline of the British army. Crates of food, ammunition, and coats lie scattered under the cold rain.
On the hills around the harbor, cavalry and infantry wait in tense silence.
Sevastopol still has not fallen, and Russian forces try to break the Allied siege. On October 25th, Russian cannon fire erupts from the misty heights.
The forward redoubts shake, and Ottoman troops are pushed back through the smoke.
If Balaclava falls, the British supply line may be cut at once. In the valley, dust rises beneath hooves and rushing artillery wheels.
A thin line of Scottish infantry stands against the Russian cavalry.
They are not thick like a wall, yet they refuse to abandon the ground. Rifle fire cracks through the smoke, and the Russian formation begins to slow. That moment becomes a symbol of calm discipline at the edge of collapse.
But Balaclava is not over, because confusion in command is spreading fast.
From the heights, officers struggle to understand the Russian guns below. A vague order passes from mouth to mouth, changing with each interpretation.
You stand beside the light brigade as men adjust their reins in silence.
Ahead is not an easy target, but a valley surrounded by artillery.
When the order to charge comes, no one can correct the mistake in time.
The whole brigade races forward, sabers flashing and flags whipping through grey smoke. The ground shakes under you as Russian guns begin firing from both sides. Cannon fire tears through the line, throwing riders and horses into chaos. They keep riding, not because victory is certain, but because the order has been given. When they reach the outpost, determination faces a challenging reality. The charge becomes a tragedy, a mistaken order carved into the memory of war. You leave Balaclava amid wounded men and cold wind crossing the empty valley. Only days later, Inkerman pulls you into another nightmare. On November 5th, thick fog covers the eastern heights of Inkerman. Russian troops move through the white fog, hoping to crush the Allied line. You can barely see the enemy, only hear footsteps and gunfire close beside you. British soldiers fight in scattered groups, separated by fog and broken ground. Artillery roars at close range, throwing stone, mud, and smoke across your face. French reinforcements arrive, keeping the Allied line from being crushed completely. Inkerman is not a clean battle on a map, but a chaotic struggle in fog. When the Russians retreat, the ground is covered with footprints and abandoned gear. The forces hold their position, but the price is extreme exhaustion and solemn determination. Then the Crimean winter falls harder than any warning spoken in camp. You pass roads of mud, where supply wagons sink and horses collapse from exhaustion. Coats arrive too late, tents tear in the wind, and bread hardens like stone. Harsh winter conditions challenge the camp's endurance quietly. In the field hospital, men lie crowded together, waiting for clean water and care. Reports from the front make the British public furious about the chaos of supply. War is no longer hidden behind victory, because newspapers carry the mud back home. You see nurses and medical workers move through dark corridors, trying to save one life at a time. Crimea becomes a painful lesson in medicine, supply, and responsibility.
Meanwhile, Sevastopol still endures, defended by Russian determination under fire.
After every storm of shells, the earthworks are rebuilt like skin over wounds. The Allied trenches crawl forward by meters, paid for with sweat and lives. At night, you crawl through mud while shovels hit stone and bullets crack nearby.
In September 1855-5, the final assault begins.
Allied guns pound the defenses until the forts vanish into smoke and broken earth. The key is Malakoff, the position holding Sevastopol's defenses together.
You rush with French soldiers across the ditch, through shouts and screaming shells.
When Malakoff falls, the whole Russian defense loses its strongest anchor. Redden still smokes, but the fate of Sevastopol is almost decided. At night, Russian troops cross a pontoon bridge northward, leaving the city burning behind them. They destroy stores and sink more ships, so the victors inherit a dead city. You stand in Sevastopol, where broken bricks and shattered cannons lie under cold ash. The Allies have won, but victory feels more like exhaustion than celebration. Russia loses its symbolic base, loses initiative, and is forced toward negotiations.
From Balaclava to Malakoff, Crimea proves that modern war devours even imperial pride. The Crimean War began with religious disputes, but the real causes were far deeper. Russia wanted influence in the Balkans, the Black Sea, and the warm water routes. The Ottoman Empire was weakening, creating both opportunity and danger for Europe. Britain feared Russia might reach the Mediterranean and threaten trade and the road to India. France wanted great power, prestige, and Catholic influence in the holy places. A diplomatic crisis became a war between several empires. On the battlefield, courage was often crushed by bad supply, hunger, disease, and cold. Crimea showed that artillery, trenches, steamships, and rifles were changing war.
Alma, Balaclava, Crimean, and Sevastopol decided more than military victory.
The war exposed weaknesses inside empires that had believed themselves invincible. Russia was defeated and lost the right to dominate the Black Sea militarily. The defeat forced Russia to rethink its army, its society, and its future reforms. For the Ottomans, Allied victory only partly hid the empire's continuing weakness. Britain and France learned that imperial power needed modern organization. War journalism and photography brought the battlefield closer to the public than ever before. Stories of hospitals, wounded men, and nurses pushed military medicine toward reform. After Crimea, war was no longer distant glory told only by generals. It became mud, cold, mistakes, public opinion, and the terrible cost of power. From ruined Sevastopol, Europe stepped toward a more modern age of war.